My husband mocked my gift at dinner. Minutes later, his smile vanished forever. Natalie brushed a stray curl behind her ear, glancing nervously around the elegantly set dining room. The soft clink of silverware on china filled the air alongside murmurs of polite conversation, but her heart pounded like thunder in her chest. She wore a simple sky-blue dress, modest and unassuming, standing in stark contrast to the gleaming tuxedos and silk gowns surrounding her. This was Thomas's world, the high-powered suits and glittering social circles he thrived in, and tonight, for once, she was stepping into it, not as an invisible bystander, but as a hopeful giver of something truly from her heart. For years, Natalie had been the quiet architect behind their home's warmth, the keeper of birthdays, anniversaries, and little traditions often overlooked by Thomas and his successful colleagues. She had poured her love into small creative projects, embroidered handkerchiefs, homemade preserves, and now a carefully crafted journal bound in soft, worn leather. She knew people in this room valued money and status, not delicate crafts or handwritten notes. Still, tonight she dared to hope that a simple gift, a gesture of genuine care, might soften his sharp gaze and remind him of the woman tucked quietly beneath his empire. When Thomas finally lifted the journal from its elegant wrapping, his expression shifted, one she recognized too well. A slow, mocking smile curled his lips as he ran his thumb over the cover. "A journal? Really?" His voice carried easily across the table, infused with amusement that felt less like humor and more like a public dismissal. "I guess we're all back in kindergarten now, huh?" The laughter exploded like a sudden storm. Some of the guests exchanged smokes, their eyes flickering with the same contempt Thomas had just shared. Natalie's throat tightened as a flush of embarrassment spread wildly across her cheeks. The warmth in her chest shriveled into a knot of shame and disbelief. She wanted to shrink, to disappear. "I thought it was thoughtful," she whispered, voice barely audible over the hum of chuckles. Thomas leaned back, the corner of his mouth twitching as he scanned the amused faces around him. "Thoughtful? It's just a cheap, sentimental thing. You do know we're not in a craft fair, right?" Her fingers trembled on the pristine tablecloth. She squeezed her eyes shut, swallowing the sting of each cruel word as laughter rippled like cruel waves. The journal, so full of hope and quiet dreams, now felt like the weight of every dismissal piled onto her. Yet, amid the humiliation, there was a small, stubborn spark deep inside her, a flicker of hurt mingled with defiance. Natalie's hands clasped together beneath the table, knuckles white as she fought back tears that threatened to break free. She was more than this moment of shame, more than the quiet woman no one seemed to notice. And as Thomas's laughter echoed off the walls, the fragile thread of hope she'd woven tonight stretched taut, on the verge of tearing, but not quite broken. What would come next, she wondered, as the eyes at the table lingered on her like sharp knives, was still unwritten. The room seemed to shrink as Thomas's laughter echoed louder, a calculated sound that sent a jolt through Natalie's chest. Without waiting, he picked up the handmade journal and with a smirk held it high like a trophy. "Take a look, everyone. Our very own arts and crafts star," he announced, passing it across the polished oak table. The glossy eyes at the table followed his lead. Some leaned in curiously, others with thinly veiled disdain. The journal, wrapped in supple leather that Natalie had painstakingly dyed herself, turned in slow circles among scoffing guests. A man with slicked-back hair snorted, "I've got nicer gifts in my briefcase." A woman in rhinestone earrings added, "Oh, how quaint. Guess this is what you give when you've run out of checks to write." Their laughter bubbled up, thick with condescension, as if the room itself was closing in on her. Natalie's fingers curled under the table's edge, pressing into the smooth surface until her nails bit into her palms. The warmth of the 14 polished place settings, the flicker of the crystal chandelier, the subtle aroma of roasted chicken and fresh herbs, all collided in an overwhelming tide of humiliation. She fought to keep her breathing steady, eyes fixed on the journal now morphed into a subject of mockery. Her lips pressed firmly together as Thomas reached for his wineglass, swirling the ruby liquid with effortless contempt. "Real gifts," he quipped, voice dripping with sarcasm, "come wrapped in bills and come with numbers to back them up. This? This is just," he paused, searching for the cruelest word, "sentimental nonsense for people stuck in the past." Whispers morphed into giggles, then outright chuckles, some strained, others eager to join the festivity at her expense. Cameras emerged, discreet but unstoppable, flashing to capture her faltering smile, the twitch of vulnerability in her eyes. Each shudder sent a wave of invisible pricks across her skin, a reminder that this moment was no longer just about Thomas. It was becoming a spectacle. Natalie's throat tightened until words stranded there, unvoiced. She tasted the bitterness of tears she refused to shed. Would the others see weakness and pile on? Would the fragile threads, holding her confidence together, snap completely? Her mind raced, images of her quiet mornings, sewing covers for the journal, afternoons choosing paper and ink, flashing against the harsh glow of this room's sneering audience. A bead of sweat traced down her temple, setting a cold trail as she swallowed hard. Her hopes for a simple connection, a bridge rebuilt across their widening divide, had been scorched in front of the very faces she wished to impress. Yet beneath the shame, a quiet ember glowed, a stubborn refusal to disappear without a fight, even if that fight was only in silence for now. "Maybe," she whispered, voice barely there, "the worth of something isn't in the price, but in the thought behind it." Her gaze flicked to Thomas, who raised an eyebrow mockingly. No one else seemed to hear her. But somewhere in that quiet was a seed, not yet grown, but planted. As the murmurs and sarcasm swirled like a storm inside the room, Natalie felt herself retreating beneath the surface, while a faint pulse of resolve beat louder in her chest. The night was far from over, and the story hadn't yet reached its turning point. Would kindness and creativity find a place amid ridicule and power? Only time and Natalie's courage would tell. The laughter had faded into tight murmurs and exchanged glances, leaving Natalie with a hollow ache that pressed deep into her chest. She stood abruptly, the silk of her dress rustling softly in the still air, excusing herself before anyone could see the tremble in her legs. The kitchen's sterile brightness was a sharp contrast to the muted warmth of the dining room. For refuge were the clatter of pots and the faint whir of the refrigerator wrapped around her like a cold embrace. Leaning against the counter, Natalie closed her eyes and took a slow, shuddering breath. 1,000 tiny moments, the smell of leather and paper while binding the journal, the promise each page held, the hope that Thomas might see her in a new light, flashed through her mind. Yet those hopes felt like fragile glass shards now, scattered and broken by the sharp edges of ridicule. "Maybe I should just leave," she whispered to herself, fingers tracing the chipped edge of a ceramic mug. The thought was tempting, to gather her strength in quiet solitude, fall away from the weight of judgment. But beneath that weariness, a faint but persistent ember flickered, refusing to let this night be her final act. Her footsteps were soft but deliberate as she returned to the dining room, her heart pounding against her ribs in a rhythmic drum of unease and determination. Through the half-open door, she caught Thomas's voice, low, cold, and cutting. "Some people just can't accept their place." The words sliced through the gathering like a sharp wind, silencing plates and murmurs for an instant. Natalie's jaw tightened, the sting of those words settling over her like a shroud. But beneath the surface, the embers of defiance glowed stronger. She refused to be defined by dismissive remarks whispered behind her back, or by the laughter that still echoed faintly from the earlier show. This moment of hurt would not mark her end. She smoothed her dress, stepping into the light of the room once more. The faces she met varied, some warm with sympathy, others cold with indifference. Yet her gaze was steady, finding in herself a quiet reservoir of strength she hadn't fully realized she possessed. The edges of her unease remained, but they were tempered now with a resolve that made her pulse steady and strong. I'm still here, Natalie thought, and I'm not going anywhere. The vulnerability of the night had laid her bare, but it's also cracked open a path towards something new, a beginning hidden inside the ache. The guests' laughter might have dimmed her glow for now, but inside, a flame was preparing to rise. As the evening stretched on, the whispers and glances could no longer silence the quiet promise Natalie carried, that she would rewrite the story they thought they knew. This was no defeat. It was the start of a fight fueled by hope and that small, stubborn seed of courage buried beneath the weight of doubt. The sharp ping of her phone startled Natalie as she stepped into the quiet sanctuary of her bedroom, the heavy door closing softly behind her. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the screen, the glow illuminating a flood of notifications. Messages, shares, comments, all swirling around a single video. Curiosity and dread tightened their grip on her chest as she tapped the play button. Her own humiliation, now caught in vivid color, replayed for the world. The recording was merciless. Thomas's cruel laughter, the mocking words slicing through the elegantly decorated room. The passing of her handmade journal, like a punchline at a tasteless joke. The camera lingered on her face, the flush of embarrassment, the sudden slipping away of pride. The voices of those guests, once a distant murmur, now thundered in her ears, amplified by the cold light of countless screens. Her breath caught in her throat as the video spread, being shared not just among Thomas's social circle, but far beyond. Comments ranged from snide to outright unkind, strangers laughing at a private wound turned public spectacle. Natalie felt exposed, as if her most vulnerable self had been stripped bare under the glaring spotlight of global judgment. The privacy of her home, the safety of a single night, shattered. For a long moment, the sting overwhelmed her, threatening to swallow her whole. The room spun subtly. Her knees weakened, forcing her to sit on the edge of the bed. The tears she'd held back before now pricked fiercely at the corners of her eyes. The weight of being judged, not just by those present, but by faceless crowds online, settled heavier than any words spoken across the polished table earlier. Her heart whispered a painful truth. Even the closest walls couldn't protect her from this. The world could be unforgiving, swift to mock, slow to understand. A crushing loneliness wrapped around her like thick fog. For minutes, Natalie toyed with the idea of retreating, vanishing from the blaze of ridicule, surrendering to the comfort of invisibility. But just as the tears spilled freely down her cheeks, she caught something in the video that everyone else had missed. In the background, a figure who had appeared indifferent during the jeering was watching the journal differently, his eyes thoughtful, almost reverent, as if he saw beyond the handmade cover to the heart beneath. It was Thomas's business partner, his gaze locked not on the joke, but on the genuine craftsmanship. Natalie's breath hitched. In a moment where most saw humiliation, she glimpsed a spark of possibility. The same careless laughter that had crushed her might just have opened a door she hadn't known existed. With shaking hands, she wiped her cheeks and sat up straighter. If one person could see the value in her gift, maybe this night's darkness could give way to something brighter. The weight of how far she'd fallen was undeniable, but so was a quiet, growing resolve. The world might be watching and judging, but Natalie wasn't finished yet. The video that had threatened to break her was about to be the start of a journey no one expected. In that solitary room, beneath the harsh glow of her phone's screen, a seed of courage took root, promising that her story was far from over. Isn't it remarkable how sometimes, even in our lowest moments, the smallest glimmer of hope can change everything? The once loud clatter of mocking laughter had dimmed to a low hum, but the tension in the grand hallway outside the dining room hung heavy like a gray fog. Natalie stood near the polished walls, her fingers nervously tracing the subtle veins in the marble beneath her touch. The journal sat quietly in her bag, wrapped in a faded ribbon, still carrying the weight of the evening's barbs, yet somehow it now whispered of potential. Her heart skittered as she noticed a figure approaching through the soft glow of the wall sconces. It was Michael Perkins, Thomas's business partner, a man known for his reserved demeanor and sharp eye for detail. Unlike the others, his face wasn't twisted with amusement or disdain. Instead, his gaze fixed quietly on the journal's well-worn leather, as if it held secrets he was eager to unravel. "Excuse me, Natalie," Michael said softly, his voice barely rising above the distant chatter. "I hope I'm not interrupting." There was an unusual gentleness in his tone, an invitation rather than a judgment. Natalie straightened, the knot in her stomach loosening just enough for her to nod. "I wanted to ask about the journal," he went on, eyes lifting to meet hers with sincere curiosity. "It's quite unique, the craftsmanship, the design. It stands apart from anything I've seen in corporate gifting." Natalie blinked, surprise flickering through her veins. No one else had shown the slightest interest beyond mockery tonight. Gathering her courage, she summarized the project. "It's a guided reflection journal, a way to blend personal growth with memory keeping. I created it as something special for Thomas, to help him slow down and appreciate life moments, even in his hectic world." Michael listened intently, nodding slowly. "That's impressive." He hesitated, then added, "Our company's gearing up for a new campaign, and we've been searching for a meaningful gift that truly connects with clients on a personal level. Your journal might be exactly what we need." The words settled like a warm sunlight on a cold morning. Natalie's chest tightened, not from doubt, but from a budding hope she thought had been crushed beneath the night's earlier cruelty. The same guests who'd laughed and sneered were oblivious to this quiet exchange unfolding in the shadows. Michael smiled, a glint of encouragement in his eyes. "If you don't mind, I'd like to discuss this further. Perhaps over coffee sometime soon." A soft breath escaped Natalie's lips, a smile rising like dawn. "I'd like that," she replied, voice steady but infused with a newfound confidence. Their conversation was a small ripple in an ocean of scorn, but for Natalie, it felt like the beginning of something larger, a chance for her creativity and kindness to be recognized, not just dismissed. As Michael's footsteps faded away, she clutched the journal to her chest, the rough leather cool and reassuring beneath her fingertips. Tonight hadn't been the end, it was a quiet turning point. And in the quiet corridors of that grand house, beneath the weight of laughter and judgment, a new story was silently unfolding. A story of resilience, recognition, and the unexpected kindness that can find its way through the cracks of even the harshest nights. Who would have thought a simple gift could carry such power? The evening was winding down when a quiet murmur broke through the chatter near the far end of the room. Natalie stood by the tall windows, fingers nervously twisting the strap of her purse, when Michael Perkins, Thomas's old college friend and now a venture investor, stepped forward. His usually reserved demeanor was softened by a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes in a way that made Natalie feel noticed, as opposed to dismissed, for the first time all night. "I wanted to find you before we left," Michael said, extending a hand. "I've been thinking about that journal, the one that caused quite the stir earlier." Natalie hesitated, then met his steady gaze. "Yes? I wasn't sure how it went over." Michael chuckled softly, an apologetic tone threading through his words. "I won't pretend I was immune to the crowd's reaction. But after you left the room, I reviewed the journal more carefully. There's something remarkable here. Your blend of personal reflection prompts woven with elegant memory keeping. It's the kind of authentic connection that's rare these days." The polished chandeliers above flickered, casting dancing patterns on the hardwood, as Michael's words sank in. Natalie's breath caught, a mixture of relief and disbelief warm in her chest. Had this man, who held influence over ventures and investments, really been taken by her creation? Her quiet craft, born from years of patience and love, was suddenly drawing attention, not for ridicule, but for respect. I'm sorry if I or anyone here made you feel anything less than brilliant tonight, Michael continued, his voice sincere. I'd like to propose we meet soon to discuss how we might bring your journal to a larger audience. It deserves to be seen, and I think there's a significant market for what you've built. Natalie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, a mix of validation, hope, and the quiet power of redemption. Around them, the same guests who had earlier scoffed now stole curious glances, their expressions shifting as the energy in the room subtly realigned. Even Thomas's previously smug smile faltered, replaced by a forced, guarded look as he realized his grip on the evening's narrative was slipping. "Thank you," Natalie said softly, her voice steady. "I'd love that." This journal was a labor of love, something I hoped could mean more than just words on a page. Michael nodded appreciatively. Sometimes the simplest things, crafted with honesty and heart, make the biggest impact. As the evening's last guests began to filter toward the doors, a newfound respect surrounded Natalie. The quiet power she held, once only known in the gentle rituals of her home, now echoed in the hushed conversations and reconsidered gazes of a room that had underestimated her for too long. Thomas's forced smile dimmed as he watched the tables turn, and in that moment, a shift rippled through their world. Natalie's gift had become more than a present, it was a statement. A promise that kindness, creativity, and quiet strength could carve their own path, no matter how loud the jeers. Isn't it incredible how one small act, when seen through a lens of empathy, can change everything it touches? The air in the upscale venue buzzed with an energy markedly different from the night of humiliation. Warm light spilled from ornate chandeliers, casting a golden glow on the neatly stacked journals displayed on a polished oak table. Natalie stood tall among familiar faces, her hands steady as she carefully arranged the latest batch, now professionally bound, embossed with subtle gold leaf and evidence of painstaking care. Thomas lingered near the edge of the room, his expression unreadable, the arrogance that once defined him now tempered by surprise and something unspoken, a recognition he hadn't expected to confront. The well-heeled friends who had jeered at Natalie weeks before now clustered nearby, their previous mockery replaced by curious admiration as they examined the journal's elegant pages filled with thoughtfully crafted prompts and delicate illustrations. Michael Perkins, the business partner who had first seen the journal's potential, stepped forward with an unmistakable enthusiasm that rippled through the gathering. "I'm thrilled to announce that we've finalized a contract to bring Natalie's journals to a wider audience. This collaboration will redefine how meaningful corporate gifts connect with heart and purpose." The room broke into genuine applause, a thunderous sound that wrapped around Natalie like a shield. Her gaze briefly caught Thomas's, his smile tight, a flicker of regret flashing in his eyes. He wanted to speak, to reclaim control, but the moment wasn't his anymore. Instead, several of his friends approached Natalie, not with scorn, but with newfound respect, their voices warmer and questions sincere. "You've really created something special," one admitted, extending a hand. "I'm sorry for not seeing it before." Natalie's lips curved into a genuine smile, warmth blossoming in her chest. "Thank you. What mattered most was believing in it, even when it felt impossible." Later, when the crowd thinned, Thomas pulled aside, the weight of the evening pressing down on him. "I underestimated you," he confessed quietly, voice low but earnest. "I was wrong to dismiss what you do, and what you mean." Natalie met his gaze evenly, her strength steady and clear. "We all have our own paths to realize who we truly are. I hope you'll see me for the woman I've always been." This wasn't just a victory over humiliation, it was a reclamation of dignity, a quiet testament to the power of resilience and inner worth. Natalie's journey, once overshadowed by laughter and scorn, now illuminated a path for others who'd been underestimated, proving that steadfast kindness and perseverance could inspire change far beyond a single moment. As the night settled into a gentle close, Natalie felt not just relief, but a profound sense of peace. The woman dismissed by the world, was now the one people turned to, with admiration, with respect, and with open hearts. Isn't it incredible how sometimes, standing quietly in your truth, the world begins to stand with you? The evening was winding down when a quiet murmur broke through the chatter near the far end of the room. Natalie stood by the tall windows, fingers nervously twisting the strap of her purse, when Michael Perkins, Thomas's old college friend and now a venture investor, stepped forward. His usually reserved demeanor was softened by a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes in a way that made Natalie feel noticed, as opposed to dismissed, for the first time all night. "I wanted to find you before we left," Michael said, extending a hand. "I've been thinking about that journal, the one that caused quite the stir earlier." Natalie hesitated, then met his steady gaze. "Yes? I wasn't sure how it went over." Michael chuckled softly, an apologetic tone threading through his words. "I won't pretend I was immune to the crowd's reaction. But after you left the room, I reviewed the journal more carefully. There's something remarkable here. Your blend of personal reflection prompts woven with elegant memory keeping. It's the kind of authentic connection that's rare these days." The polished chandeliers above flickered, casting dancing patterns on the hardwood as Michael's words sank in. Natalie's breath caught, a mixture of relief and disbelief warm in her chest. Had this man, who held influence over ventures and investments, really been taken by her creation? Her quiet craft, born from years of patience and love, was suddenly drawing attention, not for ridicule, but for respect. "I'm sorry if I or anyone here made you feel anything less than brilliant tonight," Michael continued, his voice sincere. "I'd like to propose we meet soon to discuss how we might bring your journal to a larger audience. It deserves to be seen, and I think there's a significant market for what you've built." Natalie's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, a mix of validation, hope, and the quiet power of redemption. Around them, the same guests who had earlier scoffed now stole curious glances, their expressions shifting as the energy in the room subtly realigned. Even Thomas's previously smug smile faltered, replaced by a forced, guarded look as he realized his grip on the evening's narrative was slipping. "Thank you," Natalie said softly, her voice steady. "I'd love that." This journal was a labor of love, something I hoped could mean more than just words on a page. Michael nodded appreciatively. Sometimes the simplest things, crafted with honesty and heart, make the biggest impact. As the evening's last guests began to filter toward the doors, a newfound respect surrounded Natalie. The quiet power she held, once only known in the gentle rituals of her home, now echoed in the hushed conversations and reconsidered gazes of a room that had underestimated her for too long. Thomas's forced smile dimmed as he watched the tables turn, and in that moment, a shift rippled through their world. Natalie's gift had become more than a present, it was a statement. A promise that kindness, creativity, and quiet strength could carve their own path, no matter how loud the jeers. Isn't it incredible how one small act, when seen through a lens of empathy, can change everything it touches?